Yes, in a previous life, I might have been standing up and talking about polonium-210 and the sort of things that happen when people ingest that. But obviously now we're talking about the ingestion of gluten and the effects that that has on it. So I always think that gluten is my kryptonite, really, because it sort of really ruins me and certainly saps me of any powers. So it's a very important year for Coeliac UK. It's our 50th anniversary. And in conjunction with that, we are launching our research priorities and also launching a major fundraising scheme in order to raise money to fund the research that goes along with that. So if you'll just allow me, I'll talk a little bit about how Coeliac U undertake to arrive at those research priorities, because they're obviously of interest to everybody who has an academic interest in it. They're also of great interest to the patients themselves, who would hopefully benefit as a result of the research that we intend to fund and work with yourselves on. So the research priorities were actually set up in partnership with the James Lind Alliance. Now, some of you in the UK may be familiar with the James Lind Alliance. It goes back to, I suppose, James Lind goes back to the 1700s, when Britain actually had quite a few more ships than we have today. And they were sailing around the world, but a lot of their sailors actually suffered from scurvy. And James Lind was a naval medic who at the time was trying to determine the nature of this disease, and he allocated the sailors into different groups, gave them different diets, and finally observed that it was those that received oranges and lemons actually had less of the symptoms of scurvy. Hence the original inception of a randomized controlled trial, if you like. So he was very much aware of that, and so the James Lind Alliance has set up this to support patients, carers and clinicians to agree amongst themselves as to the best priorities for research in any particular areas. They want to raise awareness of research questions which are of direct relevance and of the benefits of patients and the clinicians who treat them. And the object is to come up with a list of agreed research priorities. And having been involved in the latter end of that exercise, I could certainly say it was a very impressive scheme that they did. Now, Coeliac UK did actually undertake a pilot study in 2014 to start the process, but they then undertook a comprehensive survey in June 2017. There were over 1,000 responders, and they actually produced over 2,500 questions. A steering group then was set up to look at those, and they then grouped those questions together into 43 indicative questions. The process then went through a second phase, which was to have a second survey in December 2017, when there were then 26 questions identified, and on the 1st of February, a workshop was set up, and the top 10 research priorities were agreed. I was involved in that process, and it was very interesting hearing the different views of patients and carers, and also looking at the paediatricians and the gastroenterologists as they sort of debated the relative merits of different forms of diagnosis and treatment. So a fascinating exercise. So the result of that workshop was the top 10 research priorities were agreed, and today these will be launched. And there is, in fact, a reception later on at which the patient forum will attend, and this will then be launched as the priorities for Coeliac UK going forwards. So I can now announce the priorities that have been established. So the first one was to find the triggers for celiac disease. Now, as we've seen today, we all know about the genetic predisposition, we all know about the other environmental factors, but what are the risk factors and what are the triggers that actually initiate celiac disease in a particular individual? So, for example, why did I suddenly develop celiac disease in my 50s rather than earlier on in life? And this came out as the number one priority question. And there are plenty of case studies as shown, for example, the two twins, bottom left on the slide, where they were both diagnosed at separate times with separate symptoms, which is quite an interesting story. And then also the lady in the middle there, Maureen, she was diagnosed after 40 years, by which time she suffered from osteoporosis and neurological symptoms, and obviously suffered quite severely as a result of the disease. The second priority was better support for healthcare professionals. And obviously it's very important that professionals do have as much support, and this is covering a whole range of professionals through from gastroenterologists, GPs, dietitians, and all the carers to make sure that care is improved and that management is as best as possible. And the third one was interesting because this is something, certainly to my knowledge, has been a more recent development in the understanding of the disease, and that is understanding the neurological forms of celiac disease, particularly whether the later in life that you're diagnosed, are you more likely to suffer from the neurological complications of celiac disease. Again, that was seen to be a particularly high priority. Going on then to the next priorities, the fourth one I think is particularly interesting, and we've seen some posters today, there's also been some information in the talks that's been presented, is finding a less invasive test to recognise celiac disease. I know there's an ongoing debate really about the use of endoscopy and biopsy. Most patients in their adult life would have that, but certainly paediatric patients wouldn't. And I think there's a change in the view of how this is going to be diagnosed, particularly with the serology that's being developed nowadays and the better understanding of how to use that. So I think it will be important to put some funding into that in the future and to get some data to give evidence. Then there's also understanding the link between celiac disease and the other conditions, as we've heard today, the other autoimmune conditions, autoimmune thyroid disease, diabetes, a lot of information there, and I'm sure we'll learn more about the disease by further study in that direction. And then also, the best post-diagnosis support. It's quite evident that different patients have different follow-ups. I've already heard a number of people today talk about the 3 Ds, the diagnose, diet and discharge. And that's it. And a lot of patients don't get much more than that. Whereas really, it will be much better to have better support and better help with ensuring the benefits of the gluten-free diet. And again, this is controversial again with prescriptions and prescriptions being quite different in different countries. I'm astounding, was it they said in Sweden you get €200 for your gluten-free diet? I think Norway, thank you. I'm thinking of emigrating. Okay, and then the next 3, improving safety for people eating outside the home. I can tell you that is a really important one. I do stick to a very strict gluten-free diet, as many of the patients that I have met with through Coeliac UK. However, if you are eating out, it's very difficult. Even if you have a gluten-free menu that you're eating from, I can certainly tell you twice in the last 6 months I've been in a restaurant where I've been given breads, which are ordinary breads, and it's off a gluten-free menu, and you really have to watch what you're doing. And I know Coeliac UK has done an awful lot with the food industry and the catering industry. This is extremely important for patients. Particularly if they want to try and maintain a normal life, because I know many patients, particularly children perhaps, and particularly the elderly, they find it quite bewildering, and again people will say that this diagnosis has really spoilt their life, and in some cases with children led to social exclusion. Number 8's an interesting one, and this caused a lot of debate, certainly amongst the clinicians in the panel I was on when we had set the priority. Finding a cure for celiac disease. It would seem obvious. If we could find a cure, great, we don't have to bother with gluten-free diets. But it's a long shot, isn't it? It's going to need a lot of work, a lot of clinical trials, and could be very expensive. But I'm glad to see it in there, because I think if we can lead towards that, then actually that would be of great benefit to patients. And also, number 9, perhaps closely related, preventing the onset of celiac disease. Again, if you could actually have something that would prevent the onset in an individual that is predisposed to having celiac disease, understanding that would be a great help as well. And then finally, we've heard, I think, in some of the presentations today, the very sad cases of patients who have refractory celiac disease. John here is actually in the patient forum today, and I've met him and spoken to him. despite taking a gluten-free diet, his symptoms have not improved. And although these patients are few in number, it's a devastating condition and obviously a life-threatening situation for them. And it may be that by studying these particular individuals that we would actually gain a lot more about the understanding of the disease. So I'm really pleased to see this was in as our 10th priority here. So those are the priorities. So what is Coeliac UK going to do about it? Well, we are launching a campaign to raise money and to fund some of this research, and this is obviously of importance to yourself. And I'm pleased to announce already that we have received input from Innovate. Now, Innovate is the UK body for innovation in science. It is the main form of providing funding aimed at encouraging industry and academia to work together for the best intentions for a range of scientific endeavours. And you can see here, for example, the bioeconomy through precision medicine and discovery medicine, advanced therapeutics, improving agricultural productivity and enhancing food quality. So celiac disease really fits all these. And we have managed to get an injection of £500,000 from Innovate UK to start our research fund. Together with 250,000 which Coeliac UK have already committed and 250,000 from industry, we have our first £1 million. So I'm sure you agree with that is excellent news. We aim in the next few years to extend this to 5 million so that we can fund research projects which you yourselves may well be participants in. So the message for yourselves today is start thinking about the projects that you would like us to fund within Coeliac UK. Start thinking about the novel science, the interesting aspects of the work, how this will benefit patients, and look out because we're anticipating that there will be a call for projects. These will be projects up to 250,000, ranging from 1 year to 3 years. And if you're successful, hopefully we can work with you and fund this work to enable a better understanding of celiac disease. Now, this evening, as I say, we're launching this. As many of you here will not be at the reception this evening, we're going to give you a sneak preview of the video that has been produced to start this campaign. So, I think with one click, this should now come on.
It affects all the nerve endings. So all the nerve endings are like you've been pin stuck in you all the time, permanently.
I can't speak properly. My muscles contract when they shouldn't do.
3 years ago, I started to feel really lethargic, just tired all the time, lack of energy.
And I got really poorly, and lost a lot of weight.
And my feet started to get pins and needles, and then it moved up. I kept doing this with my hands.
You just wanted to get it out of you, but you can't get it out. You have to just wait and hope it will just go away.
It affects the balance in the brain eventually. So I can just fall. And because I've got osteoporosis, the falling is serious because then you're breaking bones.
Experiences in my head that then became seizures. You know, when you find yourself somewhere and you think, I'm not sure how I've got here, or I'm not sure why I'm here. You know, you sort of have brief moments where you think, I may be losing my mind here.
I'm losing about £1 a week in weight. I'm on continuous calcium tablets for the duration of my life because I've broken all the bones in my body.
You kind of feel different to everybody else. It's just not a nice feeling to have.
Those sort of experiences are very, very hard to explain to anybody. It just makes me feel as if I feel different, but I also feel a bit of a nuisance.
I feel really alone.
A lot of people don't realise how hard it is for people to live with it.
It makes me feel like I'm not normal anymore. I'm not the person I used to be.
In the near future, I'm hoping to start a family, and the biggest concern at the back of my mind is will my children go through this as well?
My reason for telling you all this is so that you can stop a young person becoming like me. It must be prevented.
So I really don't think I need to say anything after that. Thank you very much.